Okay, thank you to all the panelists, and we certainly found out that despite the promise, Dr. Green is just like the rest of us. Just like the rest of us. But
because of my time.
Because of the time. But we will take questions at this time. So hopefully I can see you.
Could you speak up?
Give him a mic.
This issue of coming to imagine the process of revolution, and in what she raised earlier, is there any way to wed or to find a relationship between that concept and the other question that came up earlier of the possibility of revolution? The last day of Kwanzaa is Imani, and students at Howard used to tell me, ain't nobody gonna do anything unless they believe revolution is possible.
Well, just really quickly, I think one thing that I recalled from the set of questions that were coming up during your talk was this analysis of capitalism, and how to think about capitalism, and I think particularly at a number of very astute and acute points, what sense to make of black capitalism, so-called. And I would say just simply, capitalism, of course, is a broad system with many different components. Thinking about the foundation of a kind of notion of the premise of property as being foundational to it, understanding the capacity for enterprise to generate various sorts of materials, various kinds of profits. But I think a distinction can be made, particularly in light of what capitalism is revealing itself to be in these past few years, in particular, in this country, that the achievement of inequality is something that's foundational to capitalism at its highest and most pronounced stage. And there, I think, is a standard to go back and sort of think about a couple of the points in terms of how we think about these different social conditions, these different social outcomes in relation to life within a capitalist system, something actually that Dr. Marable wrote eloquently about in Black America, I'm forgetting the title.
How Capitalism Underdeveloped
How Capitalism Underdeveloped African America, following Walter Rodney. That finding ways to challenge and confront the expectation that inequality of the ferocious degree that we see now and that has existed for 30, 40 years, certainly in relation to African America after the industrial era. Finding ways to challenge that expectation on the part of individuals who believe they should have 12 homes and 6 cars, or was it 12 cars and 6 homes, I forget. But also challenging the expectation that that's the sign of a functioning system, rather than a system that's able to realize equitable development, that's able to realize functioning services within various communities, that's able to realize the provision of basic necessities, water, health, etc., in relation to communities. I mean, that's a revolution, certainly an expectation, in the sense that the more that people train their efforts towards realizing that and demanding that a capital system distribute in a way that realizes those goals rather than concentration of wealth, then maybe we begin to see the conditions of revolution that's more ambitious, like a meaningful political transformation or a kind of full-out sort of redistribution in relation to property. But I'm sure there are going to be other thoughts on the panel because there's others more versed than I am.
Obviously, the conditions in terms of a deepening immiseration of our people over the last 25, 30 years are there, and we see a kind of new explosiveness amongst our people. So I think there's conditions there. What I'm mindful of is that in 1988, I had a conversation with a professor of African history after a course on South Africa, and he was predicting that it would be a generation or more before you could see change in South Africa. By 1994, change had occurred. Who would have thought? In fact, had we talked to people in October, no one would have predicted the uprising across Northern Africa and the Middle East that happened this spring. So at a certain level, those of us engaged in a kind of petty bourgeois lifestyle, what we have to do, if we're committed, is help build institutions and organizations and create capacity and engage in a very rigorous discourse where we are clear. Capitalism, American capitalism, is the most predatory form that capitalism takes currently on this planet. That we have to have a serious critique about that that is unrelenting. And in doing so, we can begin to educate the masses of black folks. But they're going to move without us. And they're getting ready to move. I mean, you can feel something changing. You can feel it. You know, and that's the point, that we got to have faith that there's only so far down you can push people before there's an explosion. We don't know what form it will take or when it will happen, but what happened in Northern Africa should give us, you know, strength.
Of course, I'm not going to speak to that question as an academic. I'm going to speak to it as a trained organizer in the Carpenters Union. Most often, and I've been around for 30 years. I was a student of Dr. Kalimat's 30 years ago. And we often learn about agitation and education. Dr. Hord spoke about institution. Now, as being trained in Marxism, Leninism, Lenin talks about the party. That's an institution. So if you want to talk about the realization of revolution, you have to have some institution to formulate that and to carry it out. Professionals to do that, okay? The other thing, another thing that's talked about I forget what manual it is that you need a crisis. So academics are analyzing the crisis. And Dr. Chajua just talked about, he feels something in the air. Marx wrote in the Communist Manifesto, there's an aura around Europe. The brothers in the street are killing each other. Millions are being imprisoned. That's a crisis. And I agree with him, it's coming. But if you don't have the institution, it's as Dr. Hord also said, Malcolm would say we are at best reformers. And we have to differentiate between reform and revolution.
Hi, go ahead.
Capitalism is a white construct. Capitalism is a white construct. Am I wrong? Come out of the West, right? Am I wrong on that? So white supremacy, white supremacy and capitalism go hand in hand. White supremacy and capitalism go hand in hand. And once it hit Africa, after the Arabs got through with us, you see what I'm saying? But with Islam, all right, then Christianity and capitalism. All right, I mean, this is the problem. This is the problem. Black people have bought into both of them. Whether we have power within the context of either one of them, it doesn't even matter. All right? Now, you're talking about Malcolm. The reason I love Malcolm so much was because of his integrity. Integrity. When he made the decision to leave the Nation of Islam, he knew he was dead. He knew he was dead. You know what I'm saying? He knew that. Now, his traveling over to Africa and elsewhere was somewhat a relief, but also an education. And within the context of education, all he was doing was buying time. Because they're not going to hit him in Africa, they're not going to hit him in Europe, they're going to hit him right here. All right? So what was, and we became black because of Malcolm and the Nation of Islam. Prior to that, we were Negroes. So what happened with Malcolm and the Nation of Islam was we changed the damn conversation. And so that's all these other movements begin to develop as a result of Malcolm being shot and assassinated. I just want to put one other thing on the table. And I think this is critical. And if anybody has been in a struggle at a serious level in terms of trying to build institutions, trying to make a damn payroll, trying to get product out, there's no damn game, all right? We can talk about it all we want. But you try to make a payroll every 2 weeks. What was happening with Malcolm and this is why I can appreciate this brother so much, and he never talked about it, and many didn't write about this in the book, with the state of fear, that he lived in for that year and so. Whether it was here, not only the fear of himself, but the fear of his family. How do you function on a day-to-day basis when you know somebody is coming after you? When you know they're coming after, whether it's the FBI, whether it's the Nation of Islam, they're coming after you, brother. They're taking you out of here. And I had talks with Betty about this. Long talks with Betty about this, about what happened in Audubon. And just get back to the whole question around integrity. I think that's what's missing in our struggle. That's what's missing. We got a leadership. Well, I don't need to go on here.
Respond. You know, I think that sometimes we put an inordinate amount of weight on where ideas come from. The origin of an idea isn't as important as its particular power at a particular moment. So whether capitalism or whatever else that came out of the West, they have parallel systems of oppression in other places. And at this moment, just as we have to fear the dying grass of U.S. predatory capitalism, the Chinese Communist Party is engaged in serious capitalist efforts on the continent of Africa that are as predatory as anything we've seen. Point. The other point is that while I agree in general with what you had to say, Brother Mabuti, you seem to have suggested, and I don't think you meant this, that Malcolm was staying out of the country so he could stay alive. Okay, well, I'm glad. Let's clear that up. No, he didn't say it, but the formulation could lead you to that conclusion or that interpretation. I'm clarifying. Okay. All right. Yeah, so we're clarifying.
Okay, we have gotten the word. This is a capitalist society. So our time is up. Okay. But I want all of the members of the Chicago Council on Black Studies to please stand and be recognized for putting on this great forum today. Please stand. And particular thanks to Dr. Bartley McSwine and Armstead Allen. Wonderful